President Erdogan. He's the long-serving leader of Turkey, a controversial president known for towing the line between democratic and dictatorial. Under his leadership, Turkey has become a regional powerhouse and one of the most controversial of the United States NATO allies. So how did we go from this?
I appreciate so very much the example your country has set on how to be a Muslim country and at the same time a country which embraces democracy.
To this.
I can tell you after what's happened in Syria with Erdogan and the Turks going after our allies and friends, the Kurds, I don't think this is the right moment in history for him to be a celebrated visitor to the White House.
President Erdogan rose to political prominence as the mayor of Istanbul. While in office, his party was declared unconstitutional, and he was imprisoned for inciting violence for the reading of a politically charged Islamic poem. Locking up dissidents for speech is a theme that would return in his life. But later, he would be on the other side. Back then, his plight caught the eye of Turkey's Muslims, some of whom felt oppressed by years of secular military rule in the country. After his release, Erdogan formed the AKP, a conservative political party. And in 2002, he became the prime minister of Turkey in a landslide election. He pulled Turkey out of poverty. There was talk of the country joining the European Union. Erdogan filled that office for more than a decade. And for those 10 years, he began to enact more conservative and authoritarian policies. He cracked down on protesters, imprisoned journalists, and reversed some of Turkey's secular laws. In 2014, his own party's rules prevented him from seeking another term. So he ran for president. Before Erdogan, that office was mostly ceremonial. But there were concerns that Erdogan had become too powerful. In 2016, the military attempted a coup. But it failed to remove Erdogan from power. He blamed the coup attempt on the Gulen movement, a rival religious faction in Turkey whose leader is in exile in the United States. Gulen denied any role in the coup, but it didn't stop Erdogan from undergoing a massive purge in the government. Hundreds of people died in the violence, and thousands of military members were detained. After that, Erdogan made moves to beef up his role. In a close vote in a referendum, he lengthened the president's term in office, eliminated the office of prime minister, and curbed parliament's powers. It was denounced by critics as a blatant power grab. Erdogan was re-elected again in 2018, making him the longest-serving Turkish leader ever. His ruling style has earned him a lot of critics, but one friend who's mostly remained in his corner is President Trump. Trump and Erdogan's relationship goes all the way back to 2012, when Erdogan attended the opening of Trump Towers in Istanbul. It's not a Trump property, just a licensing agreement where the building uses the Trump name.
I have a little conflict of interest because I have a major building in Istanbul, and it's a tremendously successful job. It's called Trump Towers.
The two leaders have each referred to each other as friends many times.
He's become a friend of mine.
Mr. President, my dear friend.
We have a great friendship.
And President Trump's recent decision to pull troops out of Syria, which drew bipartisan condemnation from lawmakers in the U.S., drew praise from Erdogan and cleared the way for Turkey to invade that region. But they've hit rocky patches before. President Trump hit Turkey with sanctions when they invaded Syria, attacking the Kurds, a U.S. ally in the fight against ISIS, but a group that Turkey considers a terrorist organization. And of course, there was the infamous letter that Trump sent to Erdogan, urging him not to be a, quote, tough guy and a fool in Syria, a letter that Erdogan reportedly threw in the garbage. Still, President Trump's affinity for Erdogan fits with his pattern of seeming admiration for strongmen, like Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Erdogan has visited the White House before, and this isn't the only one of his trips that's been controversial. In 2017, the Turkish president's security detail attacked a group of Kurdish protesters. They were charged, but those charges were later dismissed. Erdogan's November visit will be his third trip to the Trump White House, and it comes as tensions between the U.S. and Turkey are higher than ever. Erdogan's current term doesn't end till 2023, So when it comes to relations between the U.S. and Turkey, Erdogan will remain a fixture.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.